Well, good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome on behalf of Millim to this evening's presentation. Welcome wherever you are in the UK and, as ever, wherever you might be in the world. Our series of online talks and conversations continues with our special guest, Ashley Blaker, and I'll introduce Ashley in just a moment. A little bit of housekeeping first. We do encourage you to ask questions, and you can do this by typing whatever you'd like to say into the Q&A facility on your screen. As ever, we will try our best to get through as many of your questions as we can. Let me also draw your attention to the chat facility you have, which will allow you to send a message to all of the other participants on this webinar, should you wish to do so. Finally, this event is being recorded and it will appear on our website, millim.org.uk, in the next couple of days. There you will find details of our future program, as well as recordings of past events, which you can watch. You can also book tickets on there. And so to our guest this evening. Ashley Blaker is a comedian and a writer. He's written and produced for radio and television, and he's based in London and New York. His first book is this, Normal Schnormal, which was published earlier this year. Ashley joins a small and select group this evening, as this is actually his third appearance with Millim. He was our guest live in Leeds back in 2017, and then appeared during lockdown in 2020. So Ashley, really good to have you back.
Thank you.
We're booking you for 2027 now.
Wow, I didn't realize this. So hang on, I'm in a select group, right? Now, what does that mean? Let's quantify it. How many?
There are others, probably.
How many others?
No more than 2 or 3.
Wow.
Well,
So,
probably 2.
and how many two others? And then how many have done 4?
I think one person has done 4.
Has anyone done 5?
No.
No. Well, then, you know what? I used to think I wanted to win the Nobel Prize for Literature, or like the Booker Prize. Not that I've written fiction, but whatever. I've now decided that my absolute aim in life is to become the first person to be a guest 5 times for Millim.
Well, we would welcome you. You'll have to write another book, though.
Well, I can do it. You've given me the motivation.
So tell us what this one's about, for the benefit of people who haven't read it.
Okay. How dare they not have read it? But hopefully you'll hear about it and then buy it and read it. So, okay, I've got my copy here. It's called Normal Schnormal, my occasionally helpful guide to parenting kids with special needs. And it's basically it's a kind of part comic memoir about my life as a parent to 6 children, 3 of whom have a diagnosis of special educational needs, 3 of whom have the surname Blaker, which amounts to the same thing. And it is also a part kind of how-to guide on the subject. But it's basically, I'll be honest with you, it's the book I wish I'd read when my eldest son, who's now 19, when he was diagnosed with autism and ADHD, aged 3, 16 years ago. This is the book I wish I'd read. And because there wasn't anything like this. I read around the subject. It was all very negative, depressing. And so I've written this book, which I hope, while it doesn't shy away from the many challenges of raising children with very different kinds of needs, it's at least funny and upbeat and positive. And that's what I really wanted to do.
Was there some particular event or motivation that made you want to write this book?
Yeah, so, well, I'll tell you exactly what happened. So I did a show, my first Edinburgh show, in 2018, and it was called Ashley Blaker Observant Jew. I was a bit more observant then, but it was Observant Jew. It's quite a clever title, that, you know, like observant, observational comedian. Anyway, there you go. It's called Observant Jew. And I would mention, at one point in the show, I mentioned having 6 children. And every day, you know, those of you who don't know, you do the Edinburgh Festival, like you're basically doing a show for a month. Every day for a month, every time I did that show, 25 times, whatever, there would be a little kind of like sharp intake of breath from the audience when I'd say, I have 6 kids. And it struck me that this would be a really interesting subject for a show, having a larger than average family. Of course, interestingly, in the kind of ultra orthodox world of which I was a part at the time, it was not kind of more average. It really was relatively average, seeing that the orthodox world, the average family is more like 6.5. But anyway, I had an idea for a show. I thought I'll write that. It was actually going to be called 6.5 Children, based on that idea about that this is actually quite the average, and what it's like to have a larger than normal family. And it was booked to do. We had the venue booked and everything for the Edinburgh Fringe Festival 2020. And then obviously that didn't happen. And in the meantime, when that pandemic came along and cancelled the Fringe, we pitched the show to Radio 4, and they commissioned a series of it, 4.5 hours, called Ashley Blaker's 6.5 Children. And often the way when you write a TV show or a radio show or any kind of creative endeavor like this, you might have an idea of what it's going to be, and then you actually come to write it, and it ends up being a little bit different. And what I realized when I wrote this show was that the aspect of having a larger family made one episode, but it was not actually the things that really, I thought, made our family interesting. What made it interesting was the children themselves, what they're like and what their needs are and what their personalities are like, which is slightly, a lot of it is just down to them, but some of it is down to their different diagnoses. And I think my hunch was right, because when the series came out, one episode was about adoption, one episode was about parenting during the pandemic, but one episode was about raising children with special needs. And the reaction I had from listeners, not just listeners, I mean, lots of people tweeted about it, but also from charities like MenCap and Sense and charities like that, was so overwhelming. It made me really feel that there was a kind of hole in the market for this, and that kind of prompted me to think about writing the book. Very different endeavor, by the way. Just to give a little guide, a half-hour Radio 4 show of me talking, effectively stand up for half an hour, in script is about 6,000 words, right? It's about 6,000 words. This book is 89,000 words. So there's a lot of padding to pad out a half hour, 6,000 words to 89,000. But yes, and then the second series of the radio show was on in August, and that the entire series was just about having children with special needs. And then, yeah, it's just a subject that's really interested me, because I realized that nobody was doing anything like this.
And I think people can listen to these programs on your website, can't they?
They're all well via my website, or I mean, they only link through to BBC Sounds. Yes, they're all there on BBC Sounds. If you just Google Ashley Blaker 6.5 Children, or yes, my website is an easy place to click through to them. But they're all on BBC Sounds.
What is interesting is you came to Leeds, you did a webinar for us. You and I spent quite a bit of time together, and this was not a topic that you mentioned, and clearly reading the book, it was a big part of your life.
Yes.
And there seems to have been this watershed where suddenly you've realized this is actually something I can talk about, that is interesting, and that actually is entertaining as well.
Yes. Well, look, I mean, you first and foremost, you write about what you know. Secondly, you can't talk about every aspect of your life at once in one show. It'd be a very odd show. The first time I came to Leeds, if I was talking about doing a lot of Jewish comedy, it would be odd if I'm then talking 1 minute about characters you get in shul, and then the next minute I'm talking about taking my children to a hospital appointment. They're different things, and to me, I'm quite rigid like that. I want something that kind of works thematically. So maybe one day I'll do a show about something completely different, and so it's just about finding the things you want to talk about at that time and the things that really interest you. As I say, it was quite serendipitous in a way, because it's it's kind of come as a process and gone, okay, that's interesting. It's people are actually really interested in that. I'll talk about that. The same thing has happened before, to be honest. I mean, I don't know if I've spoken about this before, and forgive me if I'm repeating something I've said in either of my 2 previous Milim appearances. I should remember them. I don't. I remember the library that I was in, a very nice library, and I remember
Leeds Library.
Coming back to your house and having a schluff on the sofa.
It's my claim to fame, Ashley. I mean, I've dined out on
my
that
claim
for the
to
last
fame.
6
It's
years.
my claim. I've never seen so many pairs of glasses in a house. It was amazing.
Also true. Yeah.
Yes, before, and I had a show, I think, at the Carriage Works in the evening, so I had a nice rest in your house, for which I'm very grateful. So yes, even that only happened kind of serendipitously because somebody said, "Oh, a rabbi basically emailed me once, completely out of the blue, and said, would you speak at our Shul's Malava Malka?" For those who don't know what that is, that's a Saturday night kind of event after Sabbath goes out. And I said, you know, I'm not a rabbi. What do you want me to talk about? I've got nothing to say. And he said, "Oh no, I'd read about you and that you, you know, I was very, very, very orthodox at the time. I had a white shirt and black suit and payers and black hat and what have you." He said, "No, I understand you work with all these famous comedians, Lucas and Williams and Graham Norton and Russell Brand. Let's not go there. But lots of famous comedians. And that there's got to be some stories there." And, you know, I went and all right, and I spoke about it and it was, people were interested, but it was funny. And then you go, "Oh, well, people are interested in that, and they find that thing funny. So I'll do more of it until you get bored of it, and then you do something else." So sometimes it's what you're interested in. Sometimes it's what the audience is interested in. If an audience isn't interested and they reject it, it might be really interesting to you. I could tell you some really funny anecdotes about, you know, I don't know, some aspect of my life that everyone goes, I've got to be honest, I'm just not interested in this. And if that's the case, then it's best, you know, you can't flog a dead horse.
Now, you were wearing a black suit, white shirt, and a couple when we last met, and it seems you've changed. You're you look far more contemporary now. What's happened in the last few years?
Well, that all right. So, well, firstly, that's, if anyone is watching this and is super orthodox, don't stay at Jonathan Strait's house. Don't go to Jonathan Strait's house for
My
stuff.
fault.
You see all these modern glasses. It's all very modern, and you get drawn in. No, look, I'll be honest. I mean, yes, I've obviously been a little bit of a journey in life, a journey to have got to where I wasn't to begin with. And I will talk about that at great length, I'm sure, at some point. It's definitely the subject of a future show and a future book. It's not something I particularly want to delve into now. But what I will say is, and I get people, you know, people are very nosy for a start anyway. Your Jews are like, and you know, I've bumped into people. Everyone's wants to know something, you know, and whatever. Everyone wants to gossip, but I think that, yeah, that's just something that I'm gonna have to. I would like to take my time on.
It's not a problem. Now, you talk in this book about 2 kinds of children. You talk about cold plays and you talk about zappers.
Yes.
What are cold plays and what are zappers?
So this is really, when I've done, you know, a bit of TV and a bit of radio, whatever, and you get sometimes like really short amount of time. You know, you go on TV and you're going to be, particularly like daytime TV, you're going to be there for 5 minutes. You've got to be really quick and really concise in pitching your thing, you know. And if I want to pitch this show, this book, nothing kind of, I feel, captures it more, its essence, and than this thing about cold plays and zappers. And actually, it's also been the thing that when I look at like reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, and people have posted or tweeted about it and whatever, it's the things that's really captured people's imaginations. So I say early on in the book, in the preface, that I don't like the word. Obviously, I don't like the word normal. That's, as the title suggests, normal schnormal. Who cares? Who wants to be normal? But you know, these words like mainstream, special need, you know, what have you. And I like the words cold plays and zappers. So mainstream children are like Coldplay. Perfectly good, but rather boring. Like Keir Starmer, basically. I get the missionary position of children. I hope that joke's not too rude for our viewers. But they, I like Coldplay, by the way. Don't get me wrong, I like Coldplay, but a little bit dull. Now, children with special needs are like in comparison, musically, are like avant-garde musicians like Captain Beefheart and Patti Smith and Kate Bush and Frank Zappa. And that's why I've called them zappers, because my kids with special needs are like Frank Zappa, rebellious, alternative, sometimes unspeakably crap, but they don't care. They don't care because they do things their way. And just in the same way that Frank Zappa would never have cared whether his work was mainstream enough to be sold in a supermarket, like an Ed Sheeran or a Coldplay. Children with special needs are like that, and I kind of also in a way it was about, like, as a parent glorying in it. You know that way that if you're a bit of a, you look like someone who could be a bit of a muso, if you don't mind me saying, Jonathan. I don't know what kind of music you're into, but you know how, like, when you're a bit of a, I always viewed myself as a bit of a muso, like a kind of John Peel type, like that. I'm that annoying guy who wants to listen to music that other people don't, and then if that band becomes popular, you go, oh, I liked them when no one liked them.
Oh yeah.
You relate to that. You know what I'm talking about. And it's just as in the same way that I want to listen to music that would be too challenging for most listeners, too challenging for most of you. I parent the kids who would be too challenging for most parents. We're doing, me and all the parents of children with autism and ADHD and Down syndrome and any other kind of neurodivergence or learning difficulty or what have you. We are doing the real parenting that would be too challenging for everyone else. So it's not to decry anyone else, but it is to let's instead of seeing this as something that is really sad or really unfortunate or we wish we didn't have to deal with, instead let's view this as something really great, and let's be proud of ourselves that we are doing something that would be too challenging for other people. That's really the essence. So it's so funny that when I have seen, sorry to interrupt, when I've seen, like, on, like, Amazon reviews and what have you, people will say things like, oh, as a parent of two zappers, I loved it. It's definitely the things that's kind of really struck a chord. And so throughout the book, you've read it, I take it.
Yes,
so as you know, throughout the book, I would say, if you have a Coldplay, if you have a zapper, it's become a term, I suppose, in the way that, like, J.K. Rowling was brilliant, like that word muggle, and it's just kind of like just almost entered the lexicon of, like, when they get off muggles, but she invented this great term. I just wanted to have some terminology that stuck, and definitely seems to be something that people have related to.
And hopefully will be picked up by the Oxford English Dictionary.
Well, that'd be amazing. Yeah, exactly. I mean, but yeah, it's I think it's what I really like about it is, as I say, I think it really does capture something. Even if you're not aware of who Frank Zappa is.
No, certainly does. So you've got three zappers, and the other three are sort of Coldplay, but
officially Coldplays, yeah. Yes. So this is the thing, and a semi-exclusive for Millen. So I wrote this book. Where are we in? We're September. No, we're October now. Yeah. So this time last year, I'd have finished the book already. I'd have already finished writing. These things are like, they take quite a long time to then be published. They have a long process at these big publishing companies. And I've actually just written a new chapter for it, which is so it's another thing. Let me say as well. Actually, it's an A to Z. The book follows a pattern of an A to Z, but appropriately for a book about children who might find learning a little bit difficult, it's in completely the wrong order. So the first chapter is M is for meetings, 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 and it goes on to D, like D is for diagnosis autism. The last chapter is for O is for onwards and upwards. But I've actually written a new chapter called ampersand is for and there's a little bit more, which is for the paperback. And what is in this chapter is a little bit of an exclusive for you, so because I haven't really talked about this much elsewhere. So I wrote this book, and I'm writing it, and I'm thinking, you know what? I've lived with autistic sons for, over 18 years at that point. And it was only on writing about them and their hyperfixations and their sensory needs and their social awkwardness. So I realized I could have been writing about myself. So I decided to get myself assessed. And it turns out that I'm just as much a zapper as any of my kids because I have also been diagnosed with autism and ADHD. So I've written a bit about this in this extra chapter. It's only like an extra 1,000 words. And then we'll hopefully set up a second book about that subject. And that will feed into the questions you asked me earlier about my religious journey. A little bit will feature in that. But anyway, the reason I'm telling you this, beyond the fact that I want to give you an exclusive that would mean you might invite me back for a 4th session and hopefully for a record-breaking 5th session, that's what I've got my eye on, is that, yes, I have children who are undiagnosed. Now, it may be that they are, 48 years old like me and decide that they would like to seek a diagnosis. Not everyone requires it. I mean, I think that's a really important point, and I write about this in the book. My 2 sons, so we have an adopted daughter who has Down syndrome, 2 sons with autism and ADHD. They had real learning difficulties, particularly my eldest son. He had a statement. When those who don't know about this kind of thing, you can get like a statement, what they call an EHCP, or a statement of special educational needs. So that at school you get extra support. He had 35 hours, which is full time. That's like a full-time learning support assistant. So he really needed that. My 4th son, for example, I think he has more characteristics of autism than the other 2 put together. He doesn't have any learning difficulties. And I'm not entirely sure what benefit that label would do him now. So we haven't pursued it. I don't feel it would have been necessary. Likewise for myself. I mean, I think it's been a huge revelation and kind of explains a lot, and it's something I'm still processing. But I certainly never had learning difficulties, which is why I think it's something that I never really considered. I'm fairly well educated. I didn't have any learning difficulties. I went to Oxford. I didn't, it's not something. I certainly didn't need any extra support in school. So I think that's why some of our children have labels, some of them don't. That's something to consider.
You also say that your son Dylan doesn't get comedy.
Yes,
which must be quite interesting for you as a comedian.
He's very little with his comedy. He's very little with. He doesn't, he doesn't read nuance as well. He has but he's incredibly funny with some of the things he says. When I told my sons, about my diagnosis, my eldest son was completely disinterested, and then Dylan just looked at me and said, "I always knew there was something wrong with your semen," which is, little Git, he got some of the best laughs in this book, to be honest. They provide so much material. This could have been 5 volumes. I should say, so regarding the names, a lot of people have asked me about their names. And if you listen to the Radio 4 show, actually, we talk about it in the show. Both names are used. So when I wrote this book, at a very last minute, so my children have got very Jewish names. My 3rd son, who I just referred to, his name's Simcha, known as Simi. And very, very like last, quite a late decision. Like, as I was finishing the final manuscript about a year ago, I said to my editor, you know what? I'd quite like to change the names to not for privacy reasons, because privacy. They're on the front cover. Their photos are in it. Those, it's very easy to track them down. I felt that they had very Jewish names, and I felt that some of them are a bit slightly unpronounceable, maybe if you're not from the Jewish community. And I felt, you know what, there's no harm in changing them. It's maybe a possible barrier to entry. Like my fourth son, who in the book is called Edward, his name is Shrilly. Even Jews sometimes, it was short for Yisrael. Even Jews sometimes look at that and go, Shrali? Like, what is that name? And their attitude was, and I should say, absolutely adamant. You can do whatever you like, but please make it very, very clear that was your choice, not ours. They would be very happy. Now, I'd already done one series on Radio 4 with the kids as their own names. So the way I dealt with it was at the start of the first episode of the second series, I say we like call the kids together and say, look, we've decided, Mummy and I have decided, for reasons of privacy, it'd be best to give you new names. So from now on, Amy, you're Adam, I'll go for the names. And then Simi's going, no, I don't want to be Dylan. I want to be Sebastian. And we have this, and it then becomes a running joke through the whole series about them arguing about their names and what their names should be. And then in the end, I say, right, you can go back to being Simi now, and he wants to stay as Dylan. But anyway, that's you asked me the names, and people who know us, several people have been in touch with me going, so hang on, are your kids? I'm very confused. Are your kids? Are these have they been renamed? And the answer is no.
So Evelyn Russell is watching, and she says she's heard and enjoyed your radio shows. Are they your real children playing themselves?
They are. No, they are. So it's not my real wife. It's not Gemma. Which was mainly because when I wrote it, it became more of a comic character, and I felt, and she felt that she didn't want that responsibility. It needed someone who had a little bit of acting and kind of comedy chops about them to perform that. But no, it's the kids as themselves. They're great in it. They're really great. And there's actually one chapter, a very short, sweary chapter in this book. In the audio book, they do as themselves as well. Look, if I was gonna blow my own trumpet, I'd say that I've written it because I've written stuff they could say because it's stuff they have said. So it's just very easy for them to do it. Not always easy to play yourself, but they're really good at it. And yeah, they really enjoy it. I think that's a really important part as well. Obviously in terms of privacy and in terms of writing about the children, it's quite a brave thing to do in a way, because one thing, so I've read a lot of books on this kind of area, obviously. So I've written this book, so I've read a lot of like parenting memoirs and comic memoirs about kids and stuff like that. And one thing you'll notice about them is almost always they anonymize the kids. They'll like call them 1 and 2 or A and B, or just like give an initial, whatever. And then they'll never have photos of them. Now that's not to criticize anyone else's books, but personally, I always find them a little bit. It's hard to really engage with them because I don't really like, if you don't see them, I want to see them. So one thing that I really love about this book is that the children are front and center. Their photos are there. There's a photo section of photos in the middle and what have you. And I think that and I believe, and I think the result is I'm not the star. I'm sure you'd agree with me having read it. I'm not the star of this book. The kids are the stars. It's not like, I say it's a comic memoir, but it's not really about me. It's about the kids. They're the stars. Lots of people have said to me, including my editor, have gone, oh, my favorite is this one. Like my editor would say, like, oh, my favorite I keep changing my mind over which one of the kids is my favorite. I love Dylan, his stories are so funny. Oh, I love Zoe. And it's yeah, and I think they come across really well in it, and they're invested. And I would only have done it if they were happy, but they're invested in it. They play themselves in the radio show. Now I will say, I think we've probably reached the end of the line. I think now, as they grow up, I think it's time to move on from that. I don't think we'll do any more of that radio show as it is. My eldest son has moved on. He's 19. He works at Heathrow Airport in security at Terminal 3. And very proud of him. He's done amazingly well. But they've reached the end of that period. But I think it's really important that they are really fully invested in it, and and happy to do that. And I think it's a great insight into them. I'm very proud of them. And more than anything else, I think the book, I'd love the book to be, I hope it is helpful to people. I hope people enjoy. I think it's hopefully entertaining and uplifting, and makes you laugh and makes you potentially cry as well. But more than anything else, I'd like to think it was a real kind of love letter to my kids, and that the love we both have, my wife and I both have for our kids, shines through. And I think that's the most important, more important than anything else.
It's interesting what you say about the names, and sort of giving your kids these English names to possibly make the book more accessible. Having picked this book up and thinking, well, this is a Jewish comedian who's written this book. Other than the brief reference to Dylan's bacon sandwich in the first chapter, there's really nothing Jewish in the book up to about halfway through.
Oh yeah,
and then it all comes out.
Okay. Well, that's very coincidental.
Was that a conscious decision in how
No,
you?
I don't think so. But
how it happened.
I've tried to, not in terms of the spacing of it. I think there's a fair few Jewish references in there. There's a chapter called C is for Celebrations, which is about how to deal with like family milestones and celebrations and stuff like that, which is based around my eldest son's bar mitzvah and how we were going to deal with that. And then there is one of my favorite chapter in the book actually is called V is for Various Times My Children Have Humiliated Me.
Yes.
And it's I think 5 sitcom plots really. And one of them is called Passover Gate, which is about like the worst ever Seder night we had.
My favorite part of the book, I have to say.
Oh, thank you.
And possibly something you should share with our audience if you want to.
Yes. Well, no, I don't spoil too much of it, but a lot of the chapters have got like bullet points. So you'll have like M is for meetings, and this is about all the kind of many meetings you have to go to as a parent at school and all the rest of it. And then there are like bullet points, some helpful bullet points of ways to deal with it. And then there's some chapters, P is for play dates, which is just one long chapter of a 10-point plan of how to host the perfect kind of neurodiverse play date. And I think it's a really funny chapter. But what I love about V is for Various Times My Children Have Humiliated Me, there's no advice. It's just 5 really funny stories. And one of them is about this terrible Seder we had with our neighbors, who we nicknamed the Flanders, based on the neighbors in The Simpsons. I know that makes me Homer, but basically that like we're in comparison to us, they're like this angelic, perfect family, and we're this kind of disaster, chaotic house. But yes, anyway, in terms of Jewish references, there is a big Jewish reference. It's obviously explained what this is. I was thinking about it. It struck me as like, you know what? There were many times in the writing of the book where my editor, for various things, like, I don't know, just different things when we talk about the title of the book, or different, because I didn't have a title when I pitched it, just different aspects where she would use the phrase barrier to entry. And so it really put it in my mind. Now, I'm thinking to myself, if I was reading a book, about a Sri Lankan family, and all the characters had these really long names, your Mutia Muralataran type names, so harder than that, because that's one I can pronounce, but like names that I could barely read, let alone pronounce. I don't know what it is. That might maybe put me off a little bit. And I just thought, you know what? There's no harm. There's no harm can come from changing Sruli to Edward. So what I did was I just looked at each year they were born. I just looked at the most popular names that year and just picked one from the kind of top 20. Was it the right decision? Yeah, and then to say, and then I just thought, well, I'll, when I do the show live, which I did in Edinburgh, and then we'll do eventually in 2024, including, I'm sure, come to Leeds. I was, I talk about the children with those names. I've just become very used to thinking of them with both names. So, as I say, I just don't think any harm can come from it, really.
Tell us about adopting Zoe, because you must have had your hands pretty full at that point.
It's crazy, yeah. So there's so this is so we had 4 sons, and so it's covered in the book. There's a chapter called A is for Adoption, which talks about this how we adopted this little girl with Down syndrome, and it's followed by a chapter called L is for Love is Like No Other, which is about the the kind of what it was like after she moved in with us. The funny thing is, as like a lot of things in this book, actually, I've actually had to tone it down. It was kind of more crazy than I've written it. What happened was, so we had 3 sons, 2 of whom I now realize had autism and ADHD, but only one of whom was diagnosed at that time. I think if both were diagnosed, I don't think it would have happened. And then there was this very odd thing we saw in a local Jewish paper. Again, I kind of play down the Jewishness a little bit. For this a child who was from a Jewish family, that it was an advert from the London Borough of Hackney and from Norwood, the Jewish charity, who actually don't do adoptions anymore, but they used to. And they were looking for a family for this child with Down syndrome who was 1 year old. And I don't know, a moment of madness. I don't know, just something spoke to me about it. And I showed it to Gemma, and she said, "Oh, I saw that as well." And I kind of felt the same way. And we went, maybe it's the most mental thing we've ever done, but I don't know, we could do this. So anyway, so I rang the number. Someone from Norwood came around to see us. And she said, and this isn't in the book, by the way. I mean, I'm telling a much more expanded version here. I've kind of simplified it. It was too complex. So she came around and she said, I can see there are some issues here. We normally would like a year's gap between the children, and you've got this. Our youngest son was only 11 months older than Sarah, the child who in the book is called Zoe. So she said, "Look, but it could work. You seem like a nice family, and I can see lots of reasons why this might work." She said, "But you've got to be aware this is a very full-on process. Adoption really is a full-on process. It takes like best part of a year, assessment, really full-on though. There'll be social workers in your house, and we're gonna investigate every aspect of your life. We really will turn your life upside down." And it's so full-on. And she knew we were a very religious family at the time. She said, you can't be having any more children, just so you've got to please tie a knot in it for the next year or so. I was going to. So anyway, I was very interested in it though. I wanted to talk to my rabbi about it, but it turned out, lo and behold, didn't realize this at the time. So Gemma was pregnant with our 4th son. Didn't realize at the time. Found out she did a test a week later. Realized. And so anyway, so I called this woman. Her name's Gillian again, and she said, "Look, I'm really sorry. It's not going to work. I'm sorry." And we were really upset about it, genuinely. And what was interesting, over the next year, it's not, however many months, till, this would have been around 3 months, and then so the next 6-7 months, what have you, waiting for Sruli to be born. We kept seeing adverts, and I think they were getting a little bit more desperate in their kind of hunt to find a family and what have you. And periodically I'd email and say, are you really sure? We really are keen. And I know that they interviewed a family in Israel and a family in America and a family in Canada. And at different times it looked like it was close, but for some reason something fell through, blah, blah, blah. And we were really upset about it. And then literally a week after Sruli was born, I don't even even have his bris yet. I got an email from this woman saying, look, what happened? Did you have a child? And I just phoned straight away, and we got the ball rolling. And yeah, it took the best part of a year. It was a very unusual, anyone who knows anything about adoption, very unusual case. Normally what happens with adoption is that you will be assessed to be an adopter, so you get approved as an adopter. And only then, when you're an approved an adopter, you then have a potentially longer wait while they try to match you to a child. It could take years, it may never happen. You know, then you go to something called a matching panel where they decide that family A meets the needs of child B. This was very unusual, where we were only doing this for this one child. It was not, you know, and it was just, yeah, it was just meant to be. And you know, and it happened. And she's, you know, it's hard now. She's recently turned 15. She moved to us when she was 2. So, you know, she's been with us a long time now. And, you know, it's hard to think of her as anything but our own child. There are a few things in this book where I have had to simplify things. So there's a chapter called N is for No Room at the Inn, which is about our difficulty getting our eldest son into the school of our choice. And it's something which a lot of families would relate to if they've got children with special needs, where it's a, you know, real challenge to find a school. Schools, unfortunately, don't often want to have children with extra needs. It's you know, and there are some good reasons for that. You know, with money, particularly in kind of times of austerity, they may not get the provisions that they need. But even so, it's very upsetting for families. And this chapter is about that story. But, you know, and it's complete, again, I don't want to spoil it, but some of the things that happen and some of the ways that they try and stop it, and it really did go all the way to like Ed Balls, then the Secretary of State for Education, now presenter on Good Morning Britain, was the one who finally decided that he had to go here. And even then they wanted to take the House of Lords. I've actually, again, this was a Jewish school, and I actually have like kind of taken out the Jewish aspects of it. A, because I think it would be a total Chilul Hashem had I included it. But B, because frankly, no one would believe it. It's just too mental. Like they got they went and got a Pesach, which is a kind of halachic Jewish law legal kind of letter from Rabbi Eliashiv, now deceased, in Israel, who was the kind of like Godel Hador, like the greatest rabbi of the generation at the time, to say we were forbidden to send our son to this school. It's completely mad. I mean, you think, well, he didn't know him. He didn't know us. It's completely crazy. But the whole thing was so mad. You know, there are some things that, there are some stories that only when you revisit them, you go, God, I'm actually going to have to make this. Sometimes people think you might like make stuff up, like for a book, to make it sound like a bit more exciting. I've done the reverse. I've had to do the reverse sometimes because it's just like you wouldn't believe. The truth is too crazy. That's often the way with the Jewish world. I think sometimes there are some things we do, you know, and I've done shows, particularly for non-Jewish audiences, about like my religious life. There's things that like you just go, God, if I'd said this out loud, you'd just think I was just so barking. It's just, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, God, at the moment we all shake, you know, you spend 250 quid on a lemon. I mean, you just wouldn't, you couldn't make it
cheaper in Yorkshire.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Everything's cheaper in Yorkshire. You say in chapter 9 that if anybody doesn't like the book, they should send a complaint to your Twitter handle, and yet you give Michael McIntyre's Twitter
clever.
handle.
See what I've done.
Does he know?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't, you know, in all seriousness, actually, I've had, it's been so over. It's so. I don't think I've ever done anything in my career that has had such overwhelming, and you know, it's early days, and obviously not as many people have read the book yet as we'd like. Clearly want everyone in the world to read this book. It's only been out like a couple of months, so time will tell. But I honestly, in all my career, I've never done anything that has had such overwhelmingly positive response as this book. Still got a 5.0 rating on Amazon. And yeah, so people, I've not had a single complaint yet. Clearly not enough Jews have read it, because there's nothing Jews love more than complaining. And I've talked about this a lot in shows and what have you. But Jews, well, my wife is a head teacher of a Jewish school, and so she knows about this as well. Like, we were talking about this last night, because it's a similar thing. Jews love complaining. I mean, we came out of Egypt, and they were immediately complaining to Moses in the wilderness over the lack of food and what have you. We love a complaint. We love a complaint, and what I find with Jewish audiences, and again, it would probably be the same with parents in Jewish schools and what have you, is that there's no credit in the bank. Like a non-Jewish audience, right? Non-Jew goes to see Michael McIntyre, right? 20,000 people going to see Michael McIntyre at the O2. And if he does a 90-minute show, right? And if he does 85 minutes that you really enjoy, and then there's 5 minutes that you didn't enjoy, you know what? Non-Jew, he lives with it. He lives with it. Not us. Not us. The other 85 minutes is now completely nullified by that 5 minutes, and all immediately I'm getting, dear Mr. Blaker, and always, but I haven't even left the theatre. I'm getting these, and also every complaint I ever get, they always start with this line: "Dear Mr. Blaker, I'm not the kind of person who usually writes emails like this." Well, you are, because you're doing it now. You're exactly the kind of person who does this. But that's what they're like. In Jewish law, there's this concept in showing off my old knowledge here, but there's this concept of bittul b'shishim and bittul. So bittul is like nullification. So if like bittul b'shishim means nullified in like 60.
60.
So yeah. So if you've got if let's say you've got a bit of milk that drops into your cholent pot, right? If it's like only under a 60th of it, it's nullified in the mix. But there are other things where there are other times where, and I can't remember what they all are, but like where it doesn't matter even if it's like 100th, or even if whatever it is, just
bread at Pesach might
right,
be
exactly. It would be that kind of thing. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like it's nullified. It's never nullified. Sorry. And I think that's the way with like a bad joke or something you don't like and a comedy show. It just doesn't matter if you did 89 amazing minutes. I find often with Jewish audiences, if there's 1 minute that they didn't like, there's no nullification in 60. There's no nullification in 89 or 90. There's no nullification at all. It is, you are going to hear about it. And believe me, I have heard about it.
So you got
not
lots
yet.
of
Not yet with this book. Not yet.
You haven't had complaints yet. Well,
I've not had a single complaint. Please don't take this as an invitation. Please, 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 please. But no, I haven't yet. Actually, no, I haven't. I had one actually. But I've not seen online or anything. So yeah.
So you've got lots of advice to parents with children with special needs in the book. Is there one piece of advice that sort of stands out that you would, if someone said, what is the main lesson, the best lesson, the biggest lesson, what would you say?
I think look, I think that as I said at the start, it's all about the positivity. It's all about I use the word acceptance, but I want to use that a little bit lightly, because I think it's all and good. Someone saying, you can't, it takes a long time to get acceptance, to reach a point of acceptance. I think it's very easy for me to say, as the father of, let's say, of a 19-year-old who was diagnosed when he was 3. And we did have a terrible time, really, really traumatic, first. God, it just morphs into other ways. But certainly those early years when he wasn't talking, he was a complete wild force of nature. Acceptance is a hard thing to do, but to accept, to be positive, to embrace I mean, that's what we've done, I suppose, is what the book's about. It's about, embracing that our children are what make our family. They really are. They are what make our family what it is. And, that ultimately, as challenging as they may be, I wouldn't have them any other way. I think that's really, so if there's a one kind of message, I suppose that's what it is.
But the book really looks at times that have passed. So where are your children now? You've mentioned your eldest.
So my eldest son, so my eldest son. Well, that's a really important point. I mean, people sometimes, because I talk about my kids, and sometimes people say, "Wow, it must be really hard for you," and obviously, I'm not saying life is easy, but remember, this is like 19 years of lived experience and 19 years of anecdotes here. They aren't little, you can't hear much in the background at the moment. My eldest son, he really was the most challenging child in so many ways. We had so many different issues with him over the years. He, bless him, he's really, he should be very proud of himself. I think we can be a little bit proud as well as our role as his parents, but he needs to take definitely the lion's share of credit. He worked for a year at McDonald's, but he's got a very good job, as I say, at Terminal 3. He finally got GCSEs in maths and English at the third attempt. Not just the 4 as well. He got a 5 in maths. He got a 4 in English and a 5 in maths. He's got really, consider he earns good money as well, actually, for someone with, he says himself, for someone who's got no qualifications. It's a good job, and he's it's not a boring job as well. It's quite, he's found a few knives. He's found all sorts of things. You've got to be on your wits. You have your be on guard and have your wits about you the whole time. So very proud of him. My third son, well, my eldest son's now in the final year at school. My third son is doing GCSEs, but he also works part-time in a local shop, as does my second son. Now, Sarah, who's called Zoe in the book, she is really a real challenge, and it is something I've said a few, and I say this I don't say this lightly, and I'm kind of have to, I'm in two minds whether sometimes to say this. Had we known how challenging she would be, I can't honestly tell you we would have adopted her, because it is really hard work. Now that doesn't mean we don't absolutely love her, and I don't I don't regret it in any way, but she is incredibly hard work, and I don't think we necessarily had considered what it would be like. She has kind of plateaued, and she's 15. She's kind of hormonal teenager going through a lot of the physical changes, periods and that kind of thing, and yet she's got the mental age of a 4-year-old, but physically, but you can't kind of, used to be like you could 4-year-old you can pick up and take her upstairs, and she's too big for that. And it's there's a lot of challenges. She requires a lot of help with personal care. As I say, would we have done it had I known? Maybe not. I don't know, but we did. It's not easy. The other children think get easier. I mean, my third son was very challenging, but now the difficulty with him is he's very popular. He's always requiring me to like drive him around Saturday nights and picking him up at this party, there, proper kind of dad taxi service, but that's the thing. The challenges change. But what's interesting with Sarah is that the challenges kind of stay the same in a way, because she's kind of plateaued to an extent.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for being so open with us about all of this. Normal Schnormal is available from Amazon, and from all other good booksellers. It's a great read. It's entertaining, and you'll learn a lot if you read this book, whether you've got children with special education needs or not. So I'm recommending this.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I would say, give it a little picture. I mean, I would say that definitely. I'd say that I'm really proud of it, and I think anyone who's watching this, I hope, would be interested in reading it. But it's been particularly popular, not just with parents, but also grandparents and aunts and uncles and all those kind of things, but also teachers and professionals and anyone involved with children particularly have particularly enjoyed it. Yeah.
And to say thank you, another book for your Millim collection of books.
Oh,
This was published last week, so you are the first. You're the first of our guests to actually receive this. Normally, you have to give a lot of money to the UJIA to get this book, but I'm giving it to you for free.
well,
If you want to make a donation, that's up to you.
thank you.
Joking. Just a few words about our upcoming program before we leave you. Next week, we've got Jeremy Brown joining us from the USA to speak about his book, The 11th Plague, Jews and Pandemics from the Bible to COVID-19. The following week, we welcome the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallace-Simons, who will be chatting about his recently published book, Israelophobia. To book tickets for these events and for details about our future program beyond that, please visit millim.org.uk. You can sign up to our newsletter there and make sure you don't miss anything. All events, our online events, are free, but we do welcome donations. There is a link in the chat, or you can visit our website. It remains for me to thank our guest, Ashley Blaker. Thank you so much for being with us, Ashley.
Real pleasure, real pleasure.
And you're welcome on my sofa anytime you like. Looking forward to seeing you all again at a future event. Until then, stay safe. See you soon.
Bye-bye.